First Peoples First. So we begin with the acknowledgement of country.
Ladies and gentlemen, we acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands and waters where we are gathered tonight, the Parramatta people, a clan of the Darug Nation. We acknowledge their elders, past, present, and emerging. We acknowledge the Aboriginal people's ancestral connection to country, their care for the land, waters, plants, and animals over millennia, and the continuing contribution to society. Their spirituality of dreaming, expressed in place, song, story dances, kinship, ceremony, and law, has guided and sustained them through countless generations. They are the oldest continuously surviving culture in the world, and so we commit to walk together with them the paths of respect, reconciliation, and recognition. Sydney is where the First Peoples saw the arrival of the First Fleet. Their encounter with the Europeans who landed had a fateful impact. Despite the Aboriginal peoples never ceding sovereignty or title, the lie of terra nullius justified colonial disposition. This, along with disease, massacre, marginalization, and the stolen generation, led to a devastating loss of lives, land, culture, language, dignity, and self-determination. Reconciliation and interfaith relations go hand in hand, and so may our efforts in promoting interfaith contribute to bridging the gap between the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Island people of Australia who have lived here for more than 65,000 years ago, and those who have arrived here in the last 200 years.
Thank you, Ryan, for the acknowledgement of country. Good evening. Welcome, everyone, to those present here and to those via the live stream, to this special public lecture by Cardinal Michael Fitzgerald, Interreligious Dialogue in Our Day, 60 years after Nostra Aetate. I'm Kim Chong. I'm the Media and Community Liaison at the Columban Centre for Christian-Muslim Relations. We're so pleased that you could join us this evening. Thank you all for being here. Please join me in extending a warm welcome to our special guest, Cardinal Michael Fitzgerald, who has flown all the way from the UK to be here. Thank you, Cardinal Michael, for taking the time to share your experience and wisdom on interreligious dialogue with us this evening. Tonight's proceedings will consist of an introduction to this evening's moderator and my colleague, Reverend Dr. Patrick McInerney, who will then introduce Cardinal Michael Fitzgerald. After the talk by Cardinal Michael, Reverend Dr. Patrick will engage him with some initial questions and then open the Q&A to you, the audience, so that we can all take the opportunity of asking questions of Cardinal Michael. Before we begin, please ensure your mobile phones are switched off or on silent. Please note that the ladies and gents are through the last stall and directly on your left. And in the event of an emergency, please gather on the lawn outside the building. I'll now introduce this evening's moderator. Reverend Dr. Patrick McInerney is a Columban missionary priest, and he was assigned to Pakistan for more than 20 years. Currently, he is the director of the Columban Centre for Christian-Muslim Relations. Reverend Dr. Patrick has a licence from the Pontifical Institute for the Study of Arabic and Islamics in Rome, a Master's in Theology from the Melbourne College of Divinity, and a PhD from the Australian Catholic University. He is a member of the Australian Catholic Council for Interreligious Dialogue, Religions for Peace, New South Wales, and the New South Wales Council of Christians and Jews. He has taught academic courses in interreligious dialogue and Islam at the Catholic Institute of Sydney and the Broken Bay Institute. Reverend Dr. Patrick attends Muslim, interfaith and multi-faith events, conferences and celebrations. He gives talks on Islam, Christian-Muslim relations and interreligious relations to a wide variety of audiences. Please give a warm welcome to Reverend Dr. Patrick McInerney.
Thank you, Kim, for your introduction. Thank you all for your welcome. I commend to you the acknowledgement of country from tonight's proceedings. It's adapted from the Sydney Statement, an interfaith charter for building bridges between believers from different religions. It was generated and authorised by Youth Power, Parliament of the World's Religions, a coalition of young adults from different religions in Sydney. They worked together for 3 years, consulting and drafting practical steps for developing the sort of harmonious, vibrant, engaged, respectful, multi-religious society in which they want to live and raise their children. It is a world-class document. Copies are available at the back, and I invite you to take one home, and further resources are available on the dedicated website. I invite you to join our city's young people in this magnificent multi-faith enterprise. Welcome to all present here in the Cathedral Hall at Parramatta. Live streaming is COVID's greatest gift. It enables us to transcend place and time so that important events such as this can be shared with people in other places and other times. So I welcome all who are watching us live around Sydney, Australia, and the world. I just heard now there are people watching us in Jerusalem. And welcome also to those who will watch this evening's proceedings in the future. My thanks to Bishop Vincent Long and the Diocese of Parramatta for joining the Columban Centre for Christian-Muslim Relations in hosting tonight's public talk. My thanks also to the communications team of the Diocese who have done all the promotion and technical side of tonight's event. Tonight has been years in the making. Cardinal Michael Fitzgerald was to visit in 2021, but COVID restrictions prevented him from travelling. He advised me over a year ago that he was visiting in 2024, and a couple of hundred emails later, with co-hosts, planners, partners, stakeholders and invitations, here we are. It is customary for moderators to acknowledge the religious and civic dignitaries who are present. But you are all VIPs. You are all created in the image and likeness of God, each possessing an infinite dignity. So please excuse me if I forgo that formality, especially in this era of synodality and fraternity, sorority, where all are sisters and brothers together, and particularly when our topic is interfaith relations. But I will make one exception. What an extraordinary privilege it is to have such a distinguished guest speaker, and what an important topic to address. Cardinal Michael Fitzgerald is a leading exponent of the Catholic Church's teaching on and practice of interreligious dialogue. So allow me to introduce him fully. Cardinal Michael Fitzgerald is from the UK, and we hasten to add, of Irish background. He was ordained a priest as a member of the Society of Missionaries of Africa in 1961. He obtained his doctorate in theology from the Pontifical Gregorian University in 1965, and a BH Honours in Arabic from the School of Oriental and African Studies in London University. After teaching at the Pontifical Institute of Arabic and Islamic Studies, Pisa, in Rome from 1968 to 78, becoming director in 72, and at the same time in Makerere University in Kampala in Uganda from 69 to 71, he spent 2 years doing pastoral work in Halfa Jadida in the Archdiocese of Khartoum, Sudan. And how appropriate that today is the feast of the martyrs of Tiberin, and that Christian de Chergé would have been one of your students at Pisa. And if the rest of you don't know what I'm talking about, you've now got homework. After serving on the General Council of the Missionaries of Africa from 1980 to 1986, he was appointed to the Secretariat for Non-Christians, later named the Pontifical Council for Interreligious Dialogue, and now the Dicastery for Interreligious Dialogue. As secretary from 1987 to 2002, then president from 2002 to 2006. He was ordained bishop in 1992 and archbishop in 2002. During his time in the Vatican, he was also a consultor and member of other councils, committees, and working groups. In 2006, he was appointed Apostolic Nuncio in Egypt and delegate to the League of Arab States, retiring in 2012. But apparently he doesn't seem to know what the word retirement means, because he still continues to give talks, workshops, and retreats to various audiences around the world. Initially, he took up residence at St. Anne's, Jerusalem, but in September 2018, joined the newly established Community of Missionaries of Africa in Liverpool, where he is an advisor for interfaith affairs to the Archdiocesan Commission for Dialogue and Unity. In 2019, he was appointed patron of the Charity Fellowship and Aid to Christians in the East, and was created cardinal by Pope Francis on the 5th of October 2019. He was awarded the OBE for Interfaith and Interchurch Partnerships in the Queen's New Year Honours List 2022. I probably shouldn't tell you this, but in Australian slang, OBE stands for over bloody 80. He has written many articles and authored and co-authored several books on interreligious dialogue. I'm sure you'll agree with me that we could not get anyone more informed and more experienced to open for us the all too often hidden treasure that is the Catholic Church's development and practice of interreligious dialogue, a story that aligns with his career and which he helped shape. So please welcome Cardinal Michael Fitzgerald to the podium to deliver his address, Interreligious Dialogue in Our Day, 60 years after Nostra Aetate.
I will say thank you to Father Patrick, and that allows me to say thank you to everyone whom he has thanked also, without going into any details. Interreligious dialogue in our time, 60 years on from Nostra Aetate. Nostra Aetate, the document of the Second Vatican Council, its declaration on the relations of the Church to non-Christian religions, was solemnly approved on the 28th of October 1985, almost 60 years ago. So the 60 years are there. It is still relevant today. I want to read to you the opening paragraph of this document. In this age of ours, that is Nostra Aetate, when men are drawing more closely together and the bonds of friendship between different peoples are being strengthened, the Church examines with greater care the relations which she has to non-Christian religions. Ever aware of her duty to foster unity and charity among individuals and even among nations, she reflects at the outset on what men have in common and what tends to promote fellowship among them. I want to make a first remark about vocabulary. You will have noticed that the document speaks of men. Today, out of sensitivity to gender equality, we would prefer to say people. It also talks of non-Christian religions. That sounds somewhat negative. Again today, it is more usual to speak of other religions. I was very happy when the office in which I was working in the Vatican had its name changed from the Secretariat for Non-Christians to the Pontifical Council for Interreligious Dialogue. It has now, as has been said, become the Dicastery for Interreligious Dialogue, since all the departments of the Roman Curia are now called dicasteries. That's equality. Before, there were congregations and councils. They were all equal, but some were more equal than others. It shows that the Council has survived the reduction of departments, not being incorporated into another, but remaining distinctively itself. I think it shows also the importance that Pope Francis, our present Pope, gives to interreligious dialogue. Looking beyond the language to the content, we can recognize this opening statement as prophetic. For today, the world has indeed become a smaller place on account of easier travel and the greater facility of communications you spoke about. People following from a distance, that didn't happen before. At the time of the Vatican Council, everything was happening in Rome, and people didn't know what was happening unless it was reported to them. These easier travel and greater facility of communications are two dimensions of the changing world in which we live. Yet I think we might be perhaps less sanguine than the Council Fathers. It is true that the bonds of friendship between different peoples are being strengthened, or we can question that, especially with the war going on in the Holy Land. It is true that there hasn't been a world war for 80 years, but local conflicts still go on in different parts of the world, and Pope Francis often speaks about a third world war being fought piecemeal. Should we not say that the greater interconnection of peoples can have both positive and negative effects? A tsunami can bring out concrete expressions of solidarity throughout the world, but disrespect for a religious figure can make can provoke demonstrations on an almost universal scale. Nevertheless, it is true that people belonging to different religions have today many more opportunities to meet. They have the opportunities, they should take them. Religious pluralism is not a new phenomenon. One could say that it has always existed. One has only to read the scriptures, the Old or First Testament in particular, to realize how much the Jews were in contact with people of other religions. Yet Nostra Aetate was right to take notice of an increased awareness of this plurality in the world today, the result of the movement of peoples. I want now to speak about the popes since the Vatican Council. All the popes of recent times have faithfully followed the teaching of Nostra Aetate. John the 23rd convoked the Second Vatican Council to the surprise of many, even of those who elected him. He it was who set Cardinal Michael to prepare a text on relations with Jews, the text which would develop into the declaration Nostra Aetate. John the 23rd didn't live long enough to conclude Vatican II. That task was left to Paul VI, who greatly influenced the Council Fathers through his first encyclical, Ecclesiam Suam, which laid a great stress on dialogue with all people. Paul VI not only taught by his writings, but also by his actions. He set up the special office within the Roman Curia for relations with people of other religions, even before the final approval of Nostra Aetate. There was also his pilgrimage to the Holy Land and his journey to India, which he called the cradle of great religions. St. John Paul II, under whom I worked from 1987 until his death in 2005, convoked the World Day of Prayer for Peace, held in Assisi on the 27th of October 1986. This event, witnessed by millions on television, was a sure sign to Christians and to Catholics in particular that it was both right and necessary to cultivate relations with people of other religions. Pope John Paul II said to the Christians of Turkey, "It is therefore in thinking of your fellow citizens, but also of the vast Islamic world, that I express anew today the esteem of the Catholic Church for these religious values. When I think of this spiritual patrimony and of the value it has for humankind and for society, I wonder whether it is not urgent, precisely today, to recognize and develop the spiritual bonds which unite us in order to safeguard and foster on behalf of the whole of mankind social justice, moral values, peace, and freedom." I always felt that John Paul II was out ahead of us, and we were running to keep up with him. Benedict XVI stated clearly that he would follow in the steps of his predecessors, in fidelity to the teaching of Nostra Aetate. I was present here in Sydney when he met with religious leaders on the occasion of the World Youth Day in 2003. And I can testify that these leaders were delighted with their meeting with the Pope. They were impressed not only by his words, but also by his humble demeanor. Although his speech in the University of Regensburg in September 2006 offended many Muslims, Pope Benedict continued to meet with representatives of Islamic communities, and he repeatedly expressed his respect for Islam. It could even be said that by stimulating Muslim scholars to respond and to suggest the Common Word initiative, his speech in Regensburg brought Christian-Muslim dialogue to a new level. Pope Francis, in Evangelii Gaudium, which is like the program for his pontificate, states, interreligious dialogue is a necessary condition for peace in the world, and it is a duty for Christians as well as other religious communities. Pope Francis has himself, I would say, walked the talk. When he went on pilgrimage to the Holy Land, he invited along with him Rabbi Skorka, a rabbi with whom he had collaborated in Buenos Aires, and also the imam of the mosque in that city. The three of them went together to the Western Wall to present their prayer to the Almighty. Pope Francis has developed a friendship with Dr. Ahmed Tayyib, the Grand Imam of Al-Azhar. And this friendship has resulted in a common document that the two leaders signed in Abu Dhabi on the 4th of February 2019. This document on human fraternity suggests areas in which interreligious activity is needed. And he came back on this in his encyclical Fratelli Tutti, in which he quoted that from that document. I want now to speak a little about the 4 forms of dialogue which were developed by the Asian bishops and incorporated into Vatican documents. So the dialogue of life, the dialogue of action, the dialogue of discourse, and the dialogue of religious experience. Dialogue of life or harmonious living. It is defined as where people strive to live in an open and neighborly spirit, sharing their joys and sorrows, their human problems and preoccupations. It seems to me that 2 conclusions can be drawn from this definition. First, that the dialogue of life is generally a spontaneous activity carried out by people of different religions who are living side by side. In this sense, this form of dialogue has been going on for centuries in some parts of the world. Elsewhere, it is more recent immigration that has created the opportunity for this dialogue of life. Secondly, I would emphasize the word strive. Strive to live in an open, neighborly spirit, because an effort is required. people can live side by side and ignore one another. The minority living in a ghetto and the majority just ignoring them. So steps have to be taken in order to allow people to get to know one another. One of the ways of making contact is through mutual visits on the occasion of feasts such as Christmas or Easter, Hanukkah or Pesach, Eid al-Fitr, at the feast at the end of Ramadan, or Eid al-Adha, the feast of the sacrifice, Vesak, or Diwali. One of the first initiatives of the Vatican's Office for Interreligious Dialogue was to send out messages to Muslims for the end of Ramadan, a practice that continues today and one which has been taken up by many local bishops. And indeed, these messages are sent to all people of different religions for their feasts. I myself receive greetings at Christmas and Easter from the Jain community in the UK. Another way of showing interest and concern for members of the other community is by being present at significant ceremonies such as baptism or circumcision of a child, or at marriages, and also at funerals. Reciprocal visits are important for building up the dialogue of life. It could be school visits to a religious building, of course, including a Christian church for people of other religions. It is important that an explanation of the different symbols be given at that time. It is important to get the feel of the place, taking off one's shoes, covering one's head if necessary, sitting down on the floor, sharing food. As Catholics, we usually say, pray before you eat. I like to think that for Sikhs, you would say, eat before you pray, because the Sikhs always have this tradition of providing food, and you will have the food sitting on the floor, and you don't know who is next to you on the right or the left, and you don't know who is serving you. It could be a high-class person who is serving a low-class person. It doesn't matter. And then you can go and pray to the God of all. I would like to give an example of a successful dialogue of life which concerns Jews and Muslims. It was some years ago. I was in Chicago, and for a session on Islam for ecumenical advisors, and we were taken to different mosques for Friday prayer. In the mosque I went to, I noticed, waiting for the Friday prayer, I noticed on the notice board an announcement of a joint picnic of the Jewish and Christian communities. That intrigued me. So I asked the manager after the prayer, and he said, yes. How did it come about? When I was hired as manager, I decided that we should have an open day. And the committee were very suspicious. They thought I was wanting to sell the property. And I said, no, it's just so that people know who we are and what we are. And among the people who came was the local Jewish rabbi. And he was so impressed by the Islamic Centre that he asked to see the manager, and he said, our synagogue is going to be refurbished, and we are looking for a place where we can pray. Could we come here? The manager said, this is beyond me, I can't answer you, I'll ask the committee. But the committee said yes. So if you have courage, you can do things. But there is often suspicion towards Muslims in general. There is also alarm at the targeting of Christians in different parts of the world, in Syria, in Nigeria, in Burkina Faso, or the attacks on churches in Egypt, the harsh treatment of Christians in Pakistan. There is unrest between Buddhists and Christians in Sri Lanka, violence against Christians on the part of fundamentalist Hindus in India. To my mind, all this violence only highlights the importance of interreligious dialogue and the need of a readiness to start all over again when, for one reason or another, relations have been broken. You may have seen the film The Imam and the Pastor, set in Nigeria, an example of such a new start. Let me turn to dialogue of action or cooperation in the service of others. Harmonious living may lead quite naturally to actions undertaken in common. In certain countries, people of different religions are working together to face up to the problems of society, combating racism or discrimination, or also on the questions of pro-life movements that Muslims have been engaged with Christians. There have been reports from different countries of Africa particularly, of mutual assistance in villages for the construction of places of worship, whether mosques or chapels. These are examples of sporadic cooperation, but there can be also cooperation of a more permanent type. In Tunisia, for example, Christians and Muslims have collaborated in forming associations dedicated to the care of the handicapped. On a wider scale, Islamic Relief, a humanitarian organization founded in the UK by a Muslim, has been cooperating with the Catholic Association for Overseas Development, CAFOD, which represents in England the Caritas Internationalis, to respond to emergencies around the world, not only in majority Muslim countries, but elsewhere, as in Haiti. Religions for Peace, I would consider another example of dialogue of action. It must be pointed out that such common action is truly a form of dialogue. Before undertaking a common project, there needs to be serious discussion to come to an agreement on the aims of the project, on the means that are going to be used, and on who is responsible for what, including finances. If one body is concerned with the finances and the others only help, this is not real dialogue. In Africa, some missionaries would say, of course we have dialogue with Muslims. Our driver is a Muslim. That's not dialogue, that's employment. It's very different. So dialogue of discourse, dialogue and proclamation mentions as one of the forms of dialogue, the dialogue of theological exchange, where specialists seek to deepen their understanding of their respective religious heritages and to appreciate each other's spiritual values. This is formal dialogue, meetings which do not need to be, and in fact are not always confined to strictly theological themes. Indeed, in the Council, we very rarely discussed theology. We spoke about things such as bioethics. We spoke about the inequality in the world. We spoke about migration and very different things. The majority of our meetings of discourse were with Muslim groups, but there have also been meetings with Buddhists. Indeed, that is the Pontifical Council for Interreligious Dialogue, took the initiative of arranging a series of meetings with Buddhists of different schools, particularly Theravada Buddhists, Mahayana and Tibetan Buddhism. And we could sit back and allow the Buddhists to discuss among themselves, which they did. I think it was a bit unfair that we only had Catholics on the side and we were not arguing ourselves. We could have argued, but we didn't. Until recently, the Dicastery for Interreligious Dialogue has rarely engaged in dialogue with Muslims on strictly theological questions. An exception was perhaps the seminar on holiness that we held in Rome back in 1984. We examined the foundations of holiness according to the two religions, Christianity and Islam, and looked at examples of people recognized as saints. More recently, there has been a response to the Common Word initiative launched by a number of Muslim scholars following the lecture of Pope Benedict in Regensburg. These Muslim scholars called for theological dialogue, and this led to a meeting in the Vatican in 2008 on love of God and love of neighbor. These meetings have not been organized by Catholics only. In England, at Lambeth Palace and Cambridge University, a meeting with Muslims was held where the discussions turned on the understanding of Scripture, shared moral values, respect for foundational figures, religious freedom, and religiously motivated violence. We can notice that theological questions were combined with practical issues. Let me turn to the dialogue of religious experience. It has been described as an exchange where persons rooted in their own religious traditions share their spiritual riches for instance, with regard to prayer and contemplation, faith and ways of searching for God or the absolute. This form of dialogue may take place very simply by being respectfully present at the prayers or ceremonies of another community, always with the permission of that other community, if not at their explicit invitation. From my own experience, I have found it very edifying to sit in a Hindu temple and to observe the obvious devotion of the people coming to perform puja, or to witness the community spirit expressed in the Muslim Friday prayer. One form of this dialogue of religious experience is monastic interreligious dialogue, which has been organized as a special service within the Benedictine family since the mid-1970s. It has been primarily concerned with Buddhism because Buddhism is a religion in which monastic life figures strongly. And I had personally the privilege of taking part in an exchange program of Catholic monks and nuns from Europe with Buddhists in Japan. We spent some time living in Buddhist monasteries and sharing as far as possible in the life of the monks. This included meditating with them. The profound silence during these long hours of meditation was truly impressive. One could really feel the presence of God's Spirit. There is also a dialogue of religious experience with Muslims, especially with those who are engaged in Sufi Islam. Let me end with some reflections on the aim of interreligious dialogue. I'm often asked, what is the aim of interreligious dialogue? And I always reply that there is not just one aim, but rather a threefold aim. The first aim would be to help people of different religions to live together in peace and harmony. And we know that that is not easy. It implies breaking down prejudices and eliminating any discrimination based on religion. This very concrete aim should not be considered lightly, as if it were of no significance whatever. For we must remember that peace on earth between individuals, between peoples and nations, is an anticipation of that peace, which is, in fact, a mark of the kingdom of heaven. A second aim is to foster cooperation among people of different religions in the service of humanity. Dialogue and Proclamation, a document that our Council brought out in 1991, emphasizes the importance of this type of dialogue. It speaks about the importance of dialogue for integral development, social justice, and human liberation. There is a need also to join together to try to solve the great problems facing society and the world, as well as in education for justice and peace. I think that there is a growing realization that work for justice and peace and efforts towards interreligious dialogue and encounter must go hand in hand. So if the Diocese of Parramatta not only has a commission for interreligious dialogue, but a commission for social action, they should work together as far as possible. There is, however, a further aim that dialogue and proclamation indicates. Interreligious dialogue, it says, does not merely aim at mutual understanding and friendly relations. It reaches a much deeper level, that of the spirit, where exchange and sharing consist in a mutual witness to one's belief and a common exploration of one's respective religious convictions. In dialogue, Christians and others are invited to deepen their religious commitment, to respond with increasing sincerity to God's personal call and gracious self-gift. End of quotation. It would be correct to say that this deeper aim of dialogue is conversion, not in the sense of a change of religious allegiance, but rather in the biblical sense of the humble and penitent return of the heart to God and a more complete submission to God's will. This, of course, must be understood correctly. It would not be sufficient to say that dialogue aims at helping Buddhists to be better Buddhists, Christians to be better Christians, Muslims to be better Muslims. The focus is on God, not on the religion to which one belongs. I would say that we dialogue to be better human beings, and we recognize that humanity in other people, even if they belong to different religions. One has to allow the possibility of a change of religious allegiance. But it is important that this step be taken freely as a response to what is perceived as the will of God. Dialogue and Mission, a previous document, says, in this process of conversion, the law of conscience is sovereign, because no one must be constrained to act against his or her conscience, nor should he or she be impeded in acting according to his or her conscience, especially in religious matters. That is a quotation from Dignitatis Humanae, the document on religious freedom. It seems to me that a distinction has to be made between desire and goal. If I enter into dialogue with people of other religions, I would wish them all to be Christians, but because I value my own religion, and especially Jesus. But that doesn't mean that I enter into dialogue to make them Christian. There's a difference between, I think, dialogue and mission. Though mission includes dialogue, you have to conduct dialogue in a missionary, in a dialogue way, and you have to also, you bear witness to your faith in dialogue. I think I'll end there.
Thank you, Cardinal Michael, for that broad-ranging and illuminating presentation. It's the fruit of your long career in Christian, Muslim and interfaith relations. We're very grateful to you for sharing your wisdom, experience and insight. So I invite you to turn to the person next to you and share. What struck you in what the Cardinal said tonight? What surprised you? What was new to you? 2 minutes conversation. And think also of the question you might like to ask. Thank you for your enthusiasm. Thank you for your attention.
My question is this.
Very much. Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to now ask a few questions of Cardinal Michael, and after that I will invite questions from all of you. So first up, let's address the elephant in the room, Gaza. The present war between Israel and Hamas has been said to have exposed the failure of interreligious dialogue. Rabbis have felt that Muslim dialogue partners have not supported those who supported them, for example, after the Christchurch massacre, and complained that the Pope seemed to have walked back from the commitments of Nostra Aetate. Muslims have felt unsupported by state, federal and international governments. The asymmetry of forces arrayed and the disparity in the number of deaths have made it seem that Palestinian and Muslim lives matter less than others. Some church leaders have made statements, but church and civic bodies have largely been silent and impotent. What say you?
I don't really have anything to say, except that Pope Francis has been criticized because he is against war, all war, and he doesn't think that fighting the war is the solution. So that's why he has not spoken out in the way people expected. He's been criticized by Ukrainians because they haven't felt support for him, yet he has given support and material support, and he wishes the dialogue to take place. I would say also that religion is often used as a tool for oppressing people, and that is not the right way to use religion.
Thank you. The dicastery's annual message for Ramadan and Eid, which you referred to, copies of this year's message are available at the back, so please take one home. I'm delighted to share with you that we share this as widely as possible.
Yes, very good.
What's been the purpose of it, and how do you think, has it borne fruit?
This was one of the first initiatives of a confrere of mine who had been drafted into Vatican service for relations with Muslims, first with the Congregation for Oriental Churches, and then when the Secretariat for Non-Christians was set up, he was transferred to that. And he thought that he had lived in Algeria himself, and he thought that one of the ways of entering into contact with Muslims would be by expressing good wishes at the end of Ramadan. So he started in 1967, and it's been going on since. Except 1 year, he was away traveling, and nobody thought of preparing a message. So there's one gap.
You shared about the 4 types of interreligious dialogue, how Christians can reach out to believers from other religions. I know that Christianity is a religion of grace, not reciprocity, that we're called to love, no matter what response we get. Our reaching out cannot depend on the reciprocity. But can you please share a few examples of believers from other religions reaching out to Christians? And we have the opportunity to respond.
Well, referring to the messages, there was one country in West Africa where Christians were sending the message for Islam to the Muslim community, and they never got any response. And so they said, what's the use of sending this message? We should stop. And that particular year, the Muslims came at Easter and said, we are ashamed. We have never responded to your message, and we want to wish you a happy Easter. So keep going. Perseverance is a condition for dialogue, I would say. Don't get upset if people have different ideas from yourself or your group, and keep on addressing them.
In summary, Pope St. John Paul II was a philosopher pope, Pope Benedict a theologian pope, and Pope Francis is a pastoral pope. You've worked with Pope John Paul II particularly closely, and with Pope Benedict as well, and from retirement you've watched Pope Francis. So what new initiatives, sensibilities and insights do you think Pope Francis has brought to this field?
I think that he has insisted on friendship as a way to relate to people. I know Dr. M.Afr.OBE, the Imam. He was appointed Imam when I was in Egypt. I must confess that I had a better relationship with his predecessor than with Dr. M.Afr.OBE, but the Pope has made friendship with him. I think it's very interesting the way the document on human fraternity originated. Dr. M.Afr.OBE was the first Imam of Al-Azhar to come to the Pope, to visit the Pope. And he came once, and then he came a second time to Rome to take part in a dialogue meeting by the community of Sant'Egidio. And he came with a delegation of 5 people. And he asked for an audience with Pope Francis. He'd already met Pope Francis, and Pope Francis had been to Cairo to take part in a meeting for peace organized by Al-Azhar. The meeting, Pope Francis told me himself, the meeting was rather formal. But he asked them, "Do you have a program for the day?" "Well, not really. We have a conference in the evening." "Are you free for lunch? Would you join me for lunch?" "Oh, yes," they said. I don't know whether he told the sisters that 5 people were coming for lunch, but anyway, once they were at table together, the atmosphere relaxed, and it was there that the suggestion was made for a joint document, and so they worked on it.
Just remembering my colleague said to me, former colleague, said, "The hardest thing about this work of interreligious dialogue is the amount of food I have to eat." Interreligious dialogue took off with a flurry after Vatican II. But after some time it seemed to plateau and sometimes even stall. Still works well in some places and sometimes at different levels, particularly the international level, the Pope and the leaders there. But it doesn't seem to reach the pulpit, the parish. It seems marginal to the mainstream churches. So how can we revitalize interreligious dialogue? How can we make it part of the mainstream life of the church?
Well, you are a priest yourself, so you preach from time to time. There are so many things to preach about, and we don't have the chance. Formerly, they used to take the creed and work through the creed, but we have been instructed to preach homilies on the scripture. Maybe the scriptures don't give us the chance to speak about interreligious relations. But we can, I think we have to keep going and give the example and spread the example.
This one requires a short answer. Those of us drafting resolutions on interfaith relations for the plenary council proposed concrete actions for making interreligious dialogue an integral part of the life of the church. Unfortunately, our resolutions never saw the light of day. One was to make the 28th of October, the date of the publication of Nostra Aetate, or the nearest Sunday, a feast day for interreligious dialogue for the universal church, so that priests would have to preach on it at least once a year. Do you agree? Yes or no?
No! There are so many days that we get fed up with these days, and they go, and the United Nations has every day something.
Yes.
And the Pope underlines these at his Angelus. So read the Angelus of the Pope.
Very good.
That'll do.
Another suggestion.
The 25th of March, the Annunciation has been declared in the Lebanon as a national holiday, and Christians and Muslims meet in the Lebanon and they pray together.
And the Maronite Church has exported that around the world, and they hold a joint Christian-Muslim
Good.
feast of the Annunciation here in Sydney.
Good.
I attended it a couple of weeks ago. And finally, a patron saint of Interreligious Dialogue. Who would you nominate and why?
Charles de Foucauld
Charles de Foucauld.
is mentioned by Pope Francis at the end of Fratelli Tutti, who had good relations, and he worked hard at the language of the Tuaregs. He was working 8 hours a day on preparing a dictionary. So he wasn't doing nothing, but he developed friendship with the local Tuaregs.
Thank you. And now from the audience, please. We ask that you stand, say who you are, and ask a question, not make a comment or a speech, a question, and then we ask you please to be seated again, because the live streaming camera comes across your heads and you'll be blocking out the audience. Please.
Thank you. My name is Camille Jerez.
You get a microphone.
My name is Camille Jerez. Just a quick question. Where are we at with the Abrahamic Accord? It was going very strongly and then stopped, since we're talking about Christian-Islamic relations.
I think that the Abrahamic Accords between Arab countries and Israel was really political and commercial, not for the greater benefit of humanity, but for the economic situation of the countries. Personally, I think that this should be widened, and that it would be better if Israel were considered and accepted as part of the Arab world, where it is physically, and not part of Europe. I don't approve of Israel taking part in the European Championship of football or the European Song Contest, which they won one time.
Oddly enough, Australia
But they
participates in it too.
they should be in the Middle East, and that would help the Middle East and help Israel as well. But it will be a long time in coming.
Yes. Mary, please.
Mary Rayburn, I'm a sister of Our Lady of Sion, and I wanted to ask you, Michael, if you'd unpack a little more the meaning of the word dialogue. You've talked of the different types of dialogue, but dialogue's not just about chattering. So would you unpack it, please?
So logos is word. I think that is misleading, because there can be a dialogue of silence. You can be silent together before God and you really grow together. Dia is going through things, so you're discussing through, and it's usually between two people. That leads me to another remark. I think that Nostra Aetate, treating each religion separately, gives the idea that dialogue is always bilateral. I don't think it should be always bilateral. Bilateral dialogue helps you to be focused on the things that differ between the two religions, but trilateral dialogue is very difficult. Jews, Christians, and Muslims, but should be practiced. And multilateral dialogue can be very useful. We had a wonderful assembly. When I say we, I'm back at the Pontifical Council for Interreligious Dialogue. We organized an assembly before the coming millennium. So in 1999, in October, we didn't wait for the millennium because the millennium was going to be about Jesus, and we wanted it to be larger than that, so we anticipated it and we had 200 people coming to the Vatican from 20 different religious traditions. And we decided to make a statement, a common statement. So my boss, Cardinal Arinze, was told, if you want a common statement to come out, you have to write it beforehand and get people to approve it. And he said, no, in no way, no pre-cooked food. We're going to do it ourselves. And we had one talk, and we asked for comments on that talk, and then we split up into different groups to provide the comment for the common statement. The participants went off to Assisi for a day, and a drafting committee remained in my office. And we drafted the statement, which was then proclaimed in a concluding ceremony in St. Peter's Square with Pope John Paul II presiding. So we were able to do it. Is that enough on dialogue? Is that enough?
M.Afr.OBE from Islamic Sciences and Research Academy. Thank you, that was a fantastic talk. My question is the interest in dialogue or interest and involvement in dialogue in the Muslim world increasing, or is it on decline from your perspective?
It's difficult to say. I would think that from our side, there is still an emphasis put on the need for dialogue, and so people are preparing to do this. Not enough, but still a good. My own confreres don't like the word dialogue, and they prefer encounter, meeting with people and taking them as they are. I think from the Muslim side, there are countries where you do get initiatives, but there are other places where there is no interest at all. So you have to rejoice where there is interest and try to arouse it in those places where there is none.
Sounds a bit like the Catholics.
You can ask.
My name is M.Afr.OBE, and I want to be read for me, and after this one.
Okay. There are many derogatory attacks on clergy in the world right now. People judge religions because of the false superstitions that some religious people unconsciously make. They are moving away from religion. That's why values in families and human values in people are lost. Let's subject the clergy to courses and tests every year. Let them give a fatwa according to the developing New World Order. Let's guide those who give false and provocative fatwa according to their intentions. Would you like to comment on that?
I didn't get the last point. What was the last point again?
Fatwa, yes. It says, let's subject the clergy to courses and tests every year. Let them give fatwa according to the developing New World Order. Let's guide those who give false and provocative fatwa according to their intentions.
I have brought the document on human fraternity with me. 8 pages of this size. So it's very easy to read, and it's written in, I would say, straightforward language. It's not, there are no numbers. I put in the numbers myself. This document was prepared in Arabic and Italian, I think. These are the 2 official languages of this document. This is the English, which was produced by the committee for applying this document on human fraternity, for world peace and living together. So it's a very practical document with a harsh analysis of the world as it is today and suggesting areas where work can be done together. I don't know whether that responds to, yeah, but anyway. I'll go back.
Cardinal, my name is Jojo and I'm from Pakistan, Islamic country. So I just wanted to ask you one thing, like I have read in Bible, is saying that nations will fight for nation. So what you're doing is, are you trying to do kind of, trying to bring a peace between Muslim, Christian and Jewish, or what is it?
Between all people, we want peace. Not only in Pakistan, your own country, or of origin at least, there are Christians and Muslims majority, Sunni and Shia. There are Hindus also. So we want all to live together. I think what we are trying to do is to realize the plan of God who made creation and who made us different, but wanted us to live in peace. So we're trying to do the will of God, and that inspires us, it keeps us going.
You mean prevention, right? Prevention?
Prevention. Well, it may be prevention, but it may be more positive than that. Prevention is a bit negative, but it is needed sometimes. Prevention.
Promotion
Yes.
is the
Promotion.
promotion is
Promotion, yes. Increasing humanity. The Catholic Church has, and Christians generally, I suppose, have a tradition of going out to people, and Francis insists on this, going out to the peripheries, going out to the poor people, helping them to be uplifted in any way. And if we can do that, and together with other people, it's better.
Bernadette.
Bernadette, and I'm a sister of Notre Dame de Sion. I'm just thinking, could you give the numbers or approximate input from women on any of these committees? Like, would you have 3 or 4 on the different committees? And what influence are they having in their conversation? How do they approach interfaith in this life at this moment?
I personally think that women have an important role because they more easily than men will go beyond boundaries, and they will get together more easily than men, I think. There is a committee for the application of this document on human fraternity, and 2 women were selected in that committee. One is Irene Bukova, who was who's Orthodox and was the head of UNESCO. And the other is a Nobel Peace Prize winner from Liberia, I think, whose name I never able to retain. And I never heard of her. But that's my fault, not her fault. She was given the Nobel Peace Prize because of her efforts, and she was brought into this committee. What influence they have on the committee, I don't know. We had some women working in the dicastery. We had a focolarina. There is someone from the focolare movement here. We had a focolarina who was very efficient, Portuguese lady. But I would say that she had a hard position with some of the colleagues, unfortunately priests, who didn't like a woman to be over them.
Thank you. My name is James, and I work for the Peace, Justice and Ecology Office here at the Catholic Diocese of Parramatta. Really great to hear your background, and especially having taught at Makerere University and at the University of Khartoum as well. I'm originally from South Sudan. And I just wondered what do you think about the interreligious initiative, especially in the Sudan, from the time that you were there, or even in Uganda from the time when you were teaching there? Thank you.
Each country is different. They have different traditions, they have different experiences. And I was in different positions in these 2 countries, Uganda and Sudan. In Uganda, I was teaching at the university in the Department of Religious Studies. I had a position for Christian and Islamic theology. I never taught any Christianity at all during the 2 years I was there. It was all on Islam. And I must confess that when I gave my first lecture to first-year students, there were Muslims among them. And I said to myself, how can I, a Catholic priest, teach Muslims about Islam. So I told them, I'm not here to teach you. I'm here to help you to learn. You can study yourselves. You don't have to agree with what I say in my lectures, but if you have another opinion, you have to have good ground for having that opinion. It's not sufficient to say that our parents always said this. That I won't accept. But if you have good sources, then you can argue with me. And we got on well together. One Muslim student said at the end of the 2 years that she would have been happier with a Muslim lecturer. But even so, she didn't walk out of classes. In Sudan, I was in a parish, looking after Christians who were mainly from southern Sudan, because northern Sudan is majority Muslim. So these were young Sudanese who had never been at school because there was civil war in the country and the schools were closed. They had come up looking for work in the north. They were exploited, despised by the Sudanese Arabs who looked down on the Africans. They're very dark themselves, but they consider the black Africans, or the blue Africans as they call them, because they shine. That's what blue means in Arabic. They consider them as less than themselves. So while I was there with my Christian-Muslim background, I tried to make contact with Muslims as well. And the Christians didn't like this. They wanted us to be completely at their service. And we said, we're for the whole population. We must have contacts with the Muslims as well. We had an evening school in the parish run in Arabic with Muslim teachers. And we made friends with these Muslim teachers. And one of them said to us, "Why are you wasting your time with these blacks?" That convinced us that we were doing the right thing. But it was difficult. There was tension there. The Sudanese people themselves are very, very open and very polite and very, very nice people. But they were under a regime which was Islamic, and so I think they were submitting to that regime, just as people in communist countries couldn't protest against their government. They submitted to the government of a communist country.
And we have one last question.
Thank you again, Cardinal Michael, for sharing your past experiences. My name is Ryan, and I'm a high school teacher. And so, learning from your past experiences, what is your piece of advice for young people to engage in interfaith dialogue in this day and age?
Not be afraid. Go out and meet other people, even if they don't understand you and you don't understand them. Keep going. And I don't think the young people need that encouragement. They go anyway. So let them go.
Interreligious dialogue is a very important topic for our multicultural, multi-religious world and the contestations that are currently roiling in our society. We could explore further all night and still not come to an end. especially with such a well-informed guest speaker. However, I'm afraid that's all we have time for tonight. I thank you all for your attention and for your participation in the Q&A. I thank you, especially Cardinal Michael, for your talk and for your responses to our questions. You have enriched, encouraged, and inspired us. And I hope we will all take more seriously our responsibility as missionary disciples to reach out to our colleagues and neighbours of other faiths. May we all play our part in realising the vision of Pope Francis, who wrote in Fratelli Tutti, "Let us dream then, as a single family, as fellow travellers sharing the same flesh, as children of the same earth, which is our common home, each of us bringing the richness of his or her beliefs and convictions, each of us with his or her own voice, brothers and sisters all." So now I hand over to Kate Xavier, Chair of the Interfaith Commission, Diocese of Parramatta, who will offer a vote of thanks and give the concluding remarks.
Thank you very much, Cardinal Michael. We thank you for your inspiring us this evening and for giving us some courage. There are a few words that really spoke to me this evening. We have the opportunity and we should take them. I think that's a great reminder. It is our duty to engage in interreligious dialogue. And if we have courage, we can do things. And through dialogue, we can bear witness to our faith. Thank you very much for the great journey you took to come here and meet with us tonight. There are a few other thank yous that we have. First of all, to the Catholic Diocese of Parramatta, our wonderful, wonderful Bishop Vincent Long, and the wonderful work of the communications team who've done a lot of work in the back end. The Columban Centre for Christian and Muslim Relations with Father Patrick and Kim Chong. And everyone here present this evening, and those of you at home who have taken time to join us this evening. Please stay in touch and keep your eyes open for further events, particularly from the diocese, that can help foster interreligious dialogue. We thank you all this evening, and Cardinal, I knew I'd make a mistake. We have a little gift for you to thank you for your time and your wisdom and for the wonderful inspiration you've given us this evening.
Thank you.
Thank you, and please be aware of future events, which I believe will come on this slide shortly. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michael.